Hello, everyone. How about one more round of applause for the governor? That's a sentence I never thought I'd say, but it's cool. Yeah, I'm impressed that you guys all made it here. I guess the cures for Nashville hangover is an appointment to see the governor, so all makes sense. But excited to start day 2, guys. We have a great lineup. We're going to be starting it off with a fireside chat. And it's going to be featuring Jim McKelvey, who is a man of much experience. He's a co-founder of Square, a social entrepreneur who created LaunchCode, an investor with Cultivation Capital, and also a glassblowing artist who's featured in both the Smithsonian and the Museum of Modern Art. He's going to share how he lives his personal motto, which is, if not you, then who? If not now, then when? And he's going to be joined on stage by our moderator, Joe Maxwell. So please help me welcome Jim and Joe, everyone.
How's everybody doing today? Well, I'm Joe Maxwell, local FinTech entrepreneur here in Nashville, turned investor, and fortunate enough to have Jim as a partner and a friend. Jim's quite the accomplished entrepreneur and Renaissance man. I found out a few other things. He's a pianist as well, father, husband, glassblower, and a great disruptor. But, you know, Jim also has created incredible momentum in what we call FinTech. You know, our banks are becoming technology companies, and our technology companies are becoming banks, and this has happened incredibly quickly. And thanks to Jim. So Jim, I'd like to introduce you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So the book, The Makers, on modern inventors, due to your invention of the hardware of Square, and now you're in MoMA and Smithsonian. What's your view on innovation and invention?
So I have a really funny attitude towards invention, and that is it's sort of a last resort. My first attitude is that technology, like these devices, right? My attitude towards this stuff is that it does anything I want, right? So, for instance, this is supposed to be a fireside chat, right?
Yeah.
What are we missing? Damn right we are. So, what I did was I expect this device to solve that. So, give me a second here to see if we can log in. And we will try to solve that. Because, go to YouTube, the Wi-Fi. All right. There. Better? Yeah.
Mesmerizing embers. What?
So, how do you like your marshmallow?
I like my marshmallow crispy brown with the little coat on the outside where you can peel the skin and get a double marshmallow. Twice the effect. I'm from West Virginia, so we really had to leverage the marshmallows, make sure they went further.
All right.
So you're really going to give me a marshmallow?
You like it crispy?
I like it crispy. Just nice and brown and crispy.
This could take a while. But anyway, you know, my attitude towards technology is this stuff does whatever we want it to do. And sometimes you have to invent. But most of the time, you don't. Most of the time, what we're doing is just applying technology that has been invented other places.
Oh, jeez.
Oh.
Wow, Jim, you got me there.
Oh, shit.
Jim frickin' just lit up a marshmallow. There we go.
This always happens when I try to roast a marshmallow.
You burn it. And now I don't get my crispy. There we go. Okay. Blow it out. It'll sling.
There we go.
You don't want to do that.
So you got crispy there.
That's pretty cool, by the way. I don't have any clue how you just did that.
So here's the thing about technology. So much has been invented, but so little has been actually applied correctly. So the story I like to tell is my father. So my father just turned 90, and I gave him an iPad as a birthday present. When you give a 90-year-old man an iPad, it comes with a second present, which is a lesson.
Right.
All right. So I'm teaching my dad how to use the iPad. I'm going through, setting up his email, setting up Wi-Fi, doing all this stuff that's, basically, what I consider, the use cases for the iPad. And I'm explaining all this to him. And he's asking all these questions, how do I do this? How do I do this? And I finally said, okay, that's not the way to think about this device. I said, the way to think about your iPad or your iPhone is it should solve any problem you have, all right? It becomes anything you want. So you want it to become a TV, it's a TV. You want to turn it into a phone, it's a phone. You want it to be a Bloomberg terminal, it'll track your stocks. The attitude that I have is this device does anything I want it to do. And I said to my father, I said, if you can find something that this device doesn't do, call me and we'll start a $1 billion business, right? Because really, that's how Square got started. So I was in my glass studio, I was trying to sell a piece of glass, and the lady had a credit card that I couldn't process. And I was talking to her, it was a phone order, I was talking to her on an iPhone. I thought, why in the world can this thing not solve that problem? But at the time it couldn't. At the time we hadn't set up the rails, but all the stuff was there. I mean, the read head technology was there, the network was there, there was a touchpad, every piece of the solution was there, it just nobody had put it together. So that's when I called Jack and we built Square. But,
so tell me.
But invention is sort of the last resort. I mean, you have to invent little bits, but generally avoid it.
So talk about, kind of embarking in mobile payments, some of the biggest pitfalls and challenges, FinTech as we all call it, and that we know so well, and kind of how you overcame some of the early obstacles, because you and Ken, you're incredibly well known. You both had successes. You knew each other well. But yet it was, like all businesses, you lurch towards success at times.
So FinTech is different than most other tech investing or tech startups because for most companies, what you need is good idea, great team, and enough money to keep it together, okay? Those three components pretty much guarantee a success if you have a great team, great idea, and sufficient resources. This is not the case in FinTech. In FinTech, there's a fourth requirement, and that is you have to have permission. You have to have permission to do it. So we got the core Square product working in 3 weeks. That means we built the software, had the servers running, had a merchant account, had the hardware, everything was working, so we could take credit cards. And it was working. The money was moving to banks, but it was violating probably 20 different rules. Okay, we were breaking MasterCard's rules, we were breaking Visa rules, we were breaking KYC, we violated a bunch of government regulations. We got it up and running, okay, but we did not yet have permission to do it legally. And so it took us 18 months, and this is with two pretty obsessive founders. It took us a year and a half to get the regulations either changed or to comply with what was needed to actually legally do the service that we envisioned.
And how much money did you have to raise to get to that 18-month hurdle?
Well, it wasn't really a question of money. Jack and I self-funded Square. So we got a venture round later, but the money wasn't really relevant. It was just a question of time and getting, we had all the stakeholders, okay? So you have all these government regulators, and people are like, oh, regulation's bad. No, look. You want regulation in financial systems. You want a lot of regulation in financial systems. Maybe not as much as we have sometimes, but most of the times, that's really good because if you don't have that, you have tremendous problems with crime and fraud and abuse. So the regulation is necessary, but it's a very time-consuming process. So what we've seen in FinTech is this interesting thing. You have established companies who have tremendous stature. They've basically got all the rules taken care of, all right? But they're not terribly good at innovation because established companies tend to become very conservative, especially in financial technology where conservatism is rewarded. Mm-hmm. So if you're a bank, you don't get promoted for being aggressive, you get promoted for not losing somebody's money.
Absolutely.
So banks and financial institutions tend over time to become more conservative. That's in their best interest. And then you've got startups, which are very innovative, but they don't have the permission. So what we've been seeing in FinTechs, which is really great, is we marry the startups with the established companies. So at Square, we worked with MasterCard, Visa, American Express, and Chase. And those 4 partners were able to get us launched. But we needed each one of them and their strength and their credibility, frankly. And when we launch a new country, it's the same thing. We have to go in, we have to work with the banks, we have to work with the incumbents who know all the regulations and the government and all that. So it is a slow process.
So when was the founding day of Square to now? What, 5 years?
7.
7 years.
Yeah.
7 years from startup. Where's Square now and where's it going?
Oh, well, so we've had our IPO, which is great, but it also means I can't actually tell you any of the interesting stuff about my company anymore, except that things are going very, very well, and I get to see a lot of cool stuff. Square's got a range of new products. A lot of these products are, and we're expanding internationally as well, so we're going in a bunch of different directions. But one of the things that's very interesting about what Square's done is that we've gotten very intimate data with, as an outgrowth of the, the basic payment processing that we do. We're starting to see a lot of very interesting data, and we're building innovations on that. But I'm not really here to talk about Square, because that's...
Oh, I know.
The problem is...
It's just amazing how big it is.
Yeah, all the interesting stuff I can say about Square, I actually can't legally say. So that's the problem with being public. It's made me really boring.
You can tell good Square early stories, though.
Sure, yeah, there's a bunch of those. But most people have heard that stuff. That's good.
Yeah. So FinTech in the future, I mean, Jim and I work together identifying, incredible opportunities in the financial technology sector. What's your view, and I know I have my views, but where we are right now in this next wave, this next pendulum shift from embracing technologies, and sometimes we can call them disruptive, I call them enabling, they're opportunistic. Where do you think we are in that pendulum shift right now in the life cycle for adoption?
Well, the adoption is starting to happen. So what's happened is enough of the startups, like Square and a few of the early ones, have had enough success that you're getting conferences and dedicated incumbents studying FinTech. So most big financial institutions look at this and say, how is this going to change our business? How is this going to impact our business? Is our business going to be relevant in a world where people, transact with this as opposed to tellers or ATMs? And so they're asking these questions. So we've seen a lot more interest in the entire ecosystem. Also because there have been some fortunes made, we're seeing a lot more money being thrown at the ecosystem. So you've got that, fuel on the fire. So it's a fantastic time to be in the space. The problem, I think, is that now it's a question of sort of weeding through, because it's almost become trendy. Mm-hmm. Like as soon as you start having conferences on a topic, it's a little dangerous, because you're probably not going to see as much unique opportunity if thousands of people are going in. So it's at a new stage, and there are a lot more interesting things going on. But technology keeps advancing so fast that every time we get a new technology, we enable a new tier of communication. Mm-hmm. So bidirectional communication has only really been possible for the last 5 years. Okay, that's my bank to me and me to my bank in a convenient way. And that's going to change everything. It's going to change insurance. Okay, so I think one of the biggest impacts is not going to be sort of in FinTech, which is people kind of understand that. But if you think about what insurance is, which is sort of a related technology, insurance has been basically unchanged since they started Lloyd's of London. Like the fundamentals of it, pooling money together, you invest it, and you sort of sell these policies, but you're really running an investment, and the policy revenue is sort of neutral. But the way that was sold traditionally through brokers and agents, it's incredibly expensive, very inefficient. Also, the way you handle insurance, because insurance used to be handled as pools, so these amorphous pools. And you would say, well, we'll get enough of them together that it'll spread out the risk. But what if you were actually able to monitor individuals in the pool? Okay, do you think this thing is not monitoring us right now? Like, it's on, it's listening. If I say, okay, Google, it will wake up, right? So it's possible to do this monitoring, and how does that affect how we handle the insurance that we're doing? So if you're a good actor, you should have lower rates. If you're a bad actor, you should, and it's reasonable to pay higher rates.
Absolutely.
And you're already seeing monitors in cars. I mean, so all this bidirectional communication is impacting, and there are going to be other technologies that do that as well.
Well, transition a little bit. I met Jim. Jim's also a social entrepreneur and has started an organization that's getting incredible national momentum right now and national acclaim called LaunchCode. And I know it's near and dear to my heart, just the difficulty of accessing tech talent, tech labor, and anybody that says they have an abundance is lying. It's an incredibly tight market from lack of inventory, lack of skill set out there. And tell me, what was the impetus behind LaunchCode?
So LaunchCode was started about 3 years ago, and it was an experiment at the time because so I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and in St. Louis we have a huge shortage of talented programmers, as do most cities. Most growing cities have a shortage of programming talent. But what was profound in my city was that, so Jack and I are both from St. Louis, and we tried to open a Square office in St. Louis, and we had to close it because we couldn't hire people without rating the other companies. And we figured that we'd, just close the office because we didn't want to be the guys that were like, stealing your talent. So we eventually did close that office, but I also know something about technology, which is that to become a programmer, to become a competent programmer, does not take 4 years of study in college. As a matter of fact, most of the better programmers are self-taught. Even if they went to school, they're mostly self-taught. And yet, if you are self-taught and you try to get a job as a programmer, no one will hire you. Because the companies, and I'm not talking about the tech companies sort of get it, but if you talk about, sort of second-tier companies like, banks, insurance agents, advertising agencies, basically everything that is not a, sort of .com name, those companies all have HR departments that are very conservative, and they won't hire people who don't have very specific pedigrees. And because of this, the job market locks up. And the traditional solution to a lack of talent is always education. So we need welders. Let's open a school and teach some welders. Okay, so that makes sense for welding. But welding is different than programming, okay? And it's different in the fact that if I hire a welder and he really sucks, okay, his welds might fall apart, but he doesn't make all the other welders' welds fall apart, okay? In programming, if you hire somebody who is poorly trained and doesn't know what they're doing, they can commit an act that actually undoes the work of everybody. They can actually do, as an economist would call, negative work, net negative work. And because of this, companies become conservative. They say, we're only going to hire people with experience. So education doesn't work because the companies don't trust it. So what LaunchCode did was we inverted it. I said, well, if it's not working with education as the start, let's start with employment. So we went to all the employers and we made them a very simple deal. We said, if we give you somebody who is talented but does not have a credential that would normally pass muster with your HR department, but we will personally vouch for them. So in the beginning, I was personally vouching for people. I said, I've talked to this person. Joe knows how to code. You should hire Joe, even though he doesn't have a degree. Okay. And then we de-risked it for the companies by allowing the companies to fire the person on the first day. We said, you can keep Joe as long as you want, get rid of him the first day, keep him weak. And I would call the CEOs of these companies, and every CEO said yes, because there was no risk in it for them. And why would they say no? You get a person who's basically working, it was like $15 an hour, so almost free. So there was no risk for the companies. And by de-risking it for the companies, what we then did was we opened up this door. And then what subsequently happened was we interviewed a bunch of people in St. Louis who wanted these jobs, talked to 400 people, 40 of them, so 10% of the group, were qualified, and those people we placed immediately, they all ended up getting hired full-time. Even though the company had no commitment to do so, the companies all, once they saw how these people worked, said, oh yeah, we'd like to have her. And I was like, well, then you should hire her, and it worked great. But the other problem was that we had 360 people who wanted these jobs who we turned away. And in that process, I met a lady who was she was a police dispatcher and had been, so police dispatching is a horrible job. You sit in the dark and people call you with horrible problems. And she wanted a better life. She wanted to be a programmer, and she was smart enough to become a programmer, so she enrolled in a school, an accredited institution. I'm not talking the University of Phoenix here. Some for-profit predatory scumbags. But an honest-to-God, non-profit institution that's been around for 100 years. She took their course, and I tested her, and she didn't know what she was doing. And it was heartbreaking because I said, I'm sorry, I can't give you one of these positions because you don't know how to program. She's like, but I have a degree.
She did everything right.
Yeah, she said,
she did everything right.
I have a degree.
Yep.
And I said, well, it was very easy for this institution to give you a degree. What they didn't give you was a relevant education. And so this was heartbreaking. I mean, because she'd done everything right. I mean, she'd played by the rules, and this is a real college. It's a really good college, but they just suck at computer science, so she got a bad education. About the same time, my wife, who is a recovering attorney, was getting a master's degree in computer science, and I wanted to go to my home. I went to Washington University in St. Louis. I wanted to go to WashU. She didn't want to go to WashU because nobody's heard of WashU, where she's from. And she wanted to go to Harvard. And I was like, all right, well, if you get into Harvard, you can go to Harvard. So she gets into Harvard. And then because we're living in St. Louis, she's taking her Harvard classes online. And she's taking this class called CS50, which is the Intro to Computer Science. But actually, CS50, to pass this class, required a higher level of competence than those 40 people we'd just gotten jobs for. And Harvard just released the material online for free. And so I was like, oh my God, we've got Harvard curriculum available for free to everybody. Now, you don't get a Harvard degree with this, but you can take the same coursework. And I thought, well, if we can just get people to take this course for free, we can train them up to the point where we can probably get them jobs. And so now LaunchCode has sort of backed into this business of helping facilitate education. We are still not really focused on education. It's not our mission. We don't care where you get the skills, but if you get the skills, we then want to be able to get you the job, and that's what I'm doing now.
Great. So let's transition to, And by the way, Obama has spoken out very positively about LaunchCode as a platform for the country, and Jim's expanded this in his spare time to like 6 cities. He's doing great work in Miami. I mean, it's really interesting to see it and to be able to feel the energy around LaunchCode, and I know we need it. Let's move to some questions. We have about 13 minutes left. I just had one post on the activity stream. You can post them here, or there's some mics. If anybody gets up, I will call on you. One of them says, I'd love to hear Jim talk about the tech shop and what that meant for Square as they built the first prototype in a tech shop.
Tech shop. So actually, I didn't build the first prototype at the tech shop. I built subsequent prototypes. I actually built the first prototype in my glass studio and in the machine shop at Washington University, where I happen to be an alumnus. But when I was out in California, I still needed to have a place to work. And Silicon Valley real estate is so expensive that there are nobody makes anything in San Francisco anymore. It's just too expensive. So I needed a place that had a mill and a lathe and everything. And I heard of this place called Tech Shop. And it was a freak show. So there was only one of them at the time, okay? And Jim and Mark were down there running it. And it was incredible because they had all these tools, like real tools. They had a plasma cutter and Bridgeport mills. And so I just took all my stuff and signed up for tech shop courses, got checked out on the mills, and started manufacturing the early Square prototypes. Because what was happening at the time was we needed testers out in the world. And each of these units had to be built by hand. because we hadn't yet gotten to the point where we'd been able to manufacture them in volume, because we still didn't know if we were going to get permission to do anything. So Tech Shop was super important. And it's a fantastic environment because it's sort of a collaborative workspace for makers. And I love Tech Shop because when I go there, like the guy next to me is working on a lunar lander, right? And he's trying to solve the fuel slot. Like the day I was there, the guy had a lunar. I'm not making this up, right? How's he going to get to the moon? He'll figure that out later. Like he's now got this thing that like levitates, and he was having trouble controlling it because the fuel was sloshing around, was screwing up all his calculations. So he was putting battens in the fuel.
And you hopped in and helped him, I'm sure. Of course.
So yeah, you want to make something. Tech Shop's awesome. Yeah.
Any other questions out there? I see no one at the mics. How about a story? Got to have a few stories, a few fun stories in your craziness in Silicon Valley. Because here you are, a St. Louis boy, you move out there to blow this company up. So, there are a bunch of, I almost need something more specific than sort of general story, because I don't know. So my rule with stories is nobody wants to hear your success, right? That's sort of a good rule. So I think because success is boring, right? Like nobody's more boring than the guy who's successful, because you don't want to sit next to him at dinner. How's it going, Stan? Oh, everything's great. You want to sit next to the guy in the body cast. Right? He's got a good story. So if you want a good story, we're going to have to, sort of dig down into what are disasters. Give us a big ugly.
Big ugly. Here's one. I get personal failures are sort of a fun thing. So I do some public speaking now. So I get to speak in times. And I was invited to do a speech in Copenhagen, and I got to meet Jack Welch. Okay, you guys all know who Jack Welch is, right? Right. Jack Welch is a legend. He's one of my personal heroes, and a super, super brilliant and nice guy. And the organizers of the conference had me following Jack Welch. And I was like, you don't do this. I was like, no. Jack Welch follows Jim McKelvey. I don't take the stage after Jack Welch. So for those of you who don't know, Jack Welch turned around General Electric, biggest company on the planet, named Manager of the Century, okay? Nicknamed after a nuclear device, okay? Neutron Jack. How cool do you have to be nicknamed after an atomic weapon, okay? And this guy is not a guy you put on before me, okay? And so I go to the organizer. I said, look, dude, you got to switch. I got to go before Jack. I'm not taking the stage after this guy. And they said, no, the program's printed. This is how I'm going to do it. And so I'm literally sitting in the seat where Barry's there, and I'm watching Jack take this. And then Jack's in his 80s. He's not doing too well physically. So I had two chairs on the stage, and somebody has to help him up on stage. And I'm thinking, oh, thank God. Like he's old. Like he's lost it, right? I don't actually have to follow Jack Welch. And he sits down in this chair, and this guy crushes it. He is awesome. Like he loses 20 years on stage, and he's funny, he's witty, his stories are awesome. He's just killing it, okay? And I can't follow this, right? And I turn to the guy next to me, like this total strain, like when you're in panic on an airplane. You ever have an airplane, like lose an engine or something, and you just start talking to the guy next to you? Like that was the level of panic I had. So I'm talking to this guy from, I don't know where he was from. I was like, I can't follow this. I can't go up on, this guy's, I cannot take the stage after this. He says, I can't do his accent. He says, oh, Jack. He says, oh, here in Copenhagen, we love Jack Welch. We've all read his books. We've all implemented his theories. None of it works. I was like, what? He's like, it doesn't work in Copenhagen. Rank and yank doesn't work here. We're socialists. We don't stack rank people and then fire half the lower performers. He's like, yeah, Jack, he's great, but it doesn't work. And I was like, dude, I think I can talk. Because look, selection bias is strongly in effect. When you get somebody on the stage, they gave me a microphone. Why did I give you a microphone? Probably because of Square, all right. Maybe because of LaunchCode, but probably, I'm probably up here because of Square. Right. So here's the problem with taking any advice from somebody who's been successful. You don't know how much of it is luck, okay? I honestly can't tell you how much of the stuff I've done has been because I'm really hardworking and smart, which I like to think, or because I was just lucky in that case. So let's do a little math. You got 1,000 people in a room, okay? 1,000 people in an auditorium like this. How many people have to, let's do some math. Okay, let's define good decision making as making 50-50 random calls correctly. So we're going to all flip coins, and one of you is going to be able to flip heads 10 times in a row. And I know that statistically because 2 to the 10th is 1024, right? So that's about 1,000. So if you have 1,000 people in a room, one guy or girl is going to be really a savant at flipping. And when they get to the 7th flip, people are going to start gathering around him. It's like, what's your technique? And I was like, well, I dry off my hands, and then I envision, And but here's the thing. They're really trying to flip heads, okay? Now, take that into the business context. Let's say I've got a decision that's going to kill my company or save it. It's a 50-50 decision. And I know this is a big deal for my company. So what am I going to do? I'm going to read every article I can. I'm going to bust my ass. I'm going to work 20 hours a day. I am going to kill myself to make this decision correctly. And then I'm going to have to make the call, and I make the call. Okay? And I'm right. Heads. There's no way for me to tell how much of the stuff that I have done that has been successful has been because of my principles or my, philosophies, or just because I was lucky, okay? Nothing against Jack Welch, but what he did worked for GE at a period of time that was unique. And he has fantastic advice. I love his books. I like the man. He's brilliant. And yet, even advice from the manager of the century may not be relevant for somebody who is struggling with a problem today. And so I would say to anyone who's listening, yeah, okay, listen, but listen skeptically, because especially in these sort of situations where we tend to say, oh, well, this guy's a winner, so let's listen to what he did. They will honestly tell you what they think, but to somebody who's been lucky, it doesn't feel like luck.
Let's transition really quickly. I mean, I've got a Twitter feed and it's blowing up, and text messages and everything.
All right.
Southeast, Midwest, non-coastal, you know my philosophy about coastal and valuations and FinTech and chasing it. Sitting here in the Southeast, building, leading, innovating a company, you chose to go to the West Coast. You choose to live over here.
Yeah.
What's your philosophy and advice and inspiration for the entrepreneurs and the capital and the support that's really committed to building this ecosystem in the Midwest and Southeast, the flyover states, as we so coin often?
I don't think flyover states was coined by us. But I will say this. You've got two sort of games being played. There is a game at a super, super high level where you need absolutely the best in the world and massive amounts of money. And that game is played in Silicon Valley and nowhere else. Okay. We have job openings at Square that have starting salaries of $10 million. unfilled job openings where we, you know, like, we were don't send me your resumes, but like, we literally have had a job, not many, but like we had one job. It was like, how much should we pay for this? And the answer was north of $10 million for one person in one specific job. But this specific job is so focused, it is this thing that is so hard to get right now in the Valley, that's just the table stakes, okay? If you need people that are doing that, if you're playing at that level, then that's reasonable. But very few companies need to play at that level, okay? So if you don't need to play at that level, and be honest with what your idea is, you know, then it is much better to get a start in a city where the workforce is stable, the housing is available, affordable, where people can afford, and I'm not just talking about, you know, can they afford to live, but can they actually have a life, all right? So good luck hiring somebody in Silicon Valley who has kids, because the educational system out there is so broken that even if you're rich, you can't buy your way into the good schools, right? So all of a sudden, you know, people in their 30s, they have to leave, right? Because they can't raise their kids out there. So the dynamics of starting in a city that has sort of more normal, you know, living is profound, and you can get that team together very readily in cities, you know, throughout the Midwest and on both, you know, in the North and South. So it can be done anywhere.
Here's one. What lessons can you apply from the analog of glass blowing to technology development?
Glass blowing. Okay, so I'm in a glass blower for 25 years. I love it. I see glass as, well, it's an analogy for so many things. First of all, risk, okay? One of the things I've noticed about glass is that it's a substance that doesn't forgive at all. And you can't hide any error. When you're making a piece of glass, first of all, because you can see straight through it. So you can't even hide it on the inside. And I'll notice when I'm working in the studio, if I'm tense about something, I'll come back the next day and I'll look at my work and I'm like, well, my work is crap. Why is my work crap? And the answer is usually, oh, I'm upset about something else. You know, so it's sort of this like mini psychotherapy. But one of the things that is interesting about glass is that most of the time, in order to make a shape correctly, you have to get the glass extremely hot, because when it's hot, then it's very subtle or supple, and you can make the shape. But the problem is, as it gets hotter, it doesn't retain its shape as well. And so most of the times you get it too hot, it will collapse. So you're constantly facing this question of, do I take and risk what I have to get something that's even better? Okay, you can always heat it up hotter and try a little more, but as you go, it gets thinner and thinner and less stable and less stable, and it's really an exercise in how conservative you're being. And I can share one great lesson from the glass studio that I've shared. I've said this a couple times, but it's a great lesson. I'll tell you about this. So a glass, there's one guy, Lino Tagliapietro. He's the best in the world. Best glass blower in the world. By the way, he is universally acknowledged to be the best glass blower in the world. Every glass artist you talk to will tell you that Lino is the best, and this is unique in glass blowing. Nobody else in any industry I know, who's the best programmer, who's the best accountant, I don't know, who's the best soccer player, you get into a fist fight over that, but everyone agrees Lino's the best glass blower. And he teaches one class a year. He takes 7 students, and you work with a maestro for basically 10 days. And during this time, at least when I took his class, which was 15 years ago, at the time you were only allowed to ask one question. And so what the students do is they formulate their question over the period of weeks. They try to come up with the most bizarre thing that they can think of to ask the maestro to do. And then what he always does is he does it. And he is literally the best in the world. And it's amazing to watch him answer these questions. Like, how do you make glass blow square? And he's like, well, you do this, and that, comes out as a cube. And they're like, holy shit. But when I asked my question, none of the students even paid attention to the answer, because I asked such a basic question that they thought they knew. And I asked Lino how to put a foot on a bowl, which is a very basic thing. For those of you who are not glass blowers, this is taught in the first week of class. It is very simple stuff, okay? But it's something I had been doing at the time. I I'd been blowing glass for about 15 years when I took Lino's class. So I'd done this move thousands of times, but I was never comfortable with it. Like sometimes I'd do it and it was right, and sometimes I'd do it and it wouldn't go right, and I could never get it. And I only had one question, and I didn't want to waste it, but I was like, I gotta know, right? I gotta know. So I asked the maestro, how do you put a foot on a bowl? And I expected his answer to be like the answers had always been, which is I expected a demo. It's not what he did. He said, Jim, he says this in Italian, he's like, make a bowl. So I made a bowl. He's like, okay, put a foot on. So I've been doing this for 15 years. I got the foot, got the bowl. And I was about to join the two pieces of glass together. And right before I joined him, he put his hand on my shoulder. He said, wait, now. And when he said now, I let it fall. And it went on perfectly. And this blew my mind. Because I've been doing it right for 15 years. But I've been doing it at the wrong time. And if you do something in glass and you do it too early, you can make the shape, but that glass is not cold enough to freeze in that shape, and the shape is lost. But if you do it too late, you can't make the shape to begin with. And as soon as I saw timing, I was expecting this lesson in how. Like, I was expecting him to give me this lesson on how to do something. No, his lesson was when. Okay? And I thought about all the places in my life where I was making the same mistake, right? I was doing the right thing, but I was doing it at the wrong time. And that was that led to profound changes. So now I always respect both the how and the when.
It's a great way to end it. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim McKelvey. Thanks, Jim.
One more round of applause for these guys. Thank you so much. You're taking all your marshmallows with you? I thought we were going to share them.